Hey everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5 Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Good evening, Rush Nation. It's Murf here, and as you can actually see, I am on my own tonight. So unfortunately, Dan's just got a few things on and very busy. So he was a very, very late scratch, and so as a result, I'm going to be flying solo on this pod. If anybody wants to join me, then you can drop a message and we can chat and ask some questions and go through all the usual bits and pieces. But I think what I'm going to do really is just focus on where we are in the season. And a lot happened yesterday in terms of week 7, in terms of a lot of injuries, a lot of things that have gone, I'd say fairly different to perhaps expected for a lot of fantasy owners and players. I think it's time to sort of reevaluate at this point before it gets too late and think about what we're going to be doing moving forward, and then also think about what we're going to try and do for the rest of the season to make sure that we make those all-important playoffs. So I'm going to talk about some players that you could potentially pick up. I'm going to talk about some situations. There's quite a lot of stuff that we can break down and overview over the next sort of 30, sort of 45 minutes or so, maybe an hour. So we'll see how we get on. Thanks, Jack. Yeah. Actually, I'll be honest, I've styled the hair because the haircut was terrible. But more of that later. Good to see you, Stacey. Yeah. So solo pod. I guess really, let's go through the injuries because there was a lot of injuries yesterday. We'll start with Breece Hall. Breece Hall, season-ending ACL tear, that's been confirmed now. It didn't look good at the time. So if you held on to Michael Carter, then actually that's worked out quite well for you. Obviously, you don't wish injury on anyone. That's probably a better turn of phrase there. But Michael Carter is for me, if he's on your waiver wire, you empty all the fab. He is the league winner now out there on the waiver wire at that position. And there's not many out there you can. I did the waiver wire pod before this, so you heard me talk about Gus Edwards. You heard me talk about all these guys, and listen, they're all decent pickups, but they're not league winners. Michael Carter, to me, with his efficiency, with the way that he plays the game, he for me is, given the fact he's going to have no competition, is pretty much as good as you're going to get at this point, unless something better comes along, and that will require another injury. DK Metcalf, patella tendon injury. We're not sure how long he's going to be out for. So that's going to be an interesting one. Probably a few weeks. Doesn't sound, I mean, at one point it looked like it was going to be another knee injury and looked like he was going to be out. So this seems like good news that this could only be out a few weeks. I've just literally had some breaking news come through on the phone that Matt Ryan is going to be benched next week for Sam Ehlinger. That is a bit of a surprise. I don't think Matt Ryan has been that bad. I think he's been amazing. That's going to force us to reevaluate the entire core. I talked about picking up Paris Campbell. Talked about picking up Alec Pierce. Sam Ehlinger coming in. I'm not so confident now that looks like a really smart decision. They could run the ball. This could be what really helps Jonathan Taylor get back to those sorts of levels because they've been passing the ball a lot. That's a really interesting one to see that. Apparently PJ Walker is also going to start for the Panthers next week, and that's just come in as well, regardless of who's fit. So PJ Walker's got a starting berth, and Sam Ehlinger. I think that massively changes my perception of the Colts offense. And I've been thinking they're pass happy, add Paris Campbell, add Alec Pierce. I've been saying for a few weeks now. I think that dynamic shifts now to a run first offense. I think that's how I'm interpreting that move. I don't understand why you would make that move otherwise. unless you're really done with Matt Ryan and you're thinking, well, I've got a quarterback here, and you're basically tanking for the season to see what he does. But a rookie quarterback who's never played in the NFL, this doesn't feel like a good move for an offense that was just starting to get going. So yeah, that kind of changes a few things for me quite significantly. But we'll talk about some changes a bit. David Njoku is going to be out for 2 to 5 weeks with a high ankle sprain. Daniel Bellinger, this looked nasty. Has suffered a fracture near his eye socket and septum, and he may require surgery. So we're talking about a tight end who has really established himself, has really been going places. The integral part of that Giants offense has been lacking some pass catchers. This is a big blow for me. I really like Daniel Bellinger. Thought he was a good prospect. Thought he did well to earn the starting berth there, and that looks like he's going to miss some time. So that's a real big shame. Nico Collins, he suffered a groin injury on Sunday. He didn't return. That's not going to be great news. Corey Davis looks like he suffered an MCL sprain. Looks like he might only be out a week or two with that. So that is not the worst news, but given how bad that passing offense is, are we really that bothered in the sense of is Corey Davis someone that we're overly chasing? Probably not. Mike Williams has suffered a sprain to his right ankle, so he's going to go under further test today to see how bad that is. Whenever I hear that, that's always a prep for he's going to be out a few weeks at minimum. So not saying that's definitely what's happening, but that's one to keep an eye on as well, definitely over the next few hours. And Amon-Ra St. Brown almost likely to be out next week with concussion. And then you add to that the injuries of DeAndre Swift, J.K. Dobbins, Cam Akers, Elijah Moore, Michael Thomas. There's just so many injuries right now that the whole landscape is just really, really difficult. And so we can talk about what's happened in week 7. There's a lot to review. The Bucs offense, there's or lack of it. We're looking at the Green Bay Packers and what's going on in that situation. Kind of broke that down last week. I don't feel like there's a lot to add, as well as also the Buccaneers situation. But really what we're seeing is these teams that we thought were good are actually not that good. And the teams that we actually thought were terrible are not that bad, in a few exceptions. I mean, we're looking at the Jets. Offensively aren't brilliant, but their defense is incredible. So I think what we've got now is half a season's worth of data. We can start to look at how we can interpret matchups, and rather than sitting here and just making the general assumptions that, we'll pick Green Bay wide receivers and we'll pick Buccaneers wide receivers and we expect these all to turn around. They're not turning around. And these situations they might turn around at some point, but if we keep wasting weeks, we're losing that time to potentially go ahead and make the changes that could get us into a playoffs. So we need a whole mind shift. We need to really think about what we're going to be doing for the rest of the season. And that means either making some trades or making some bold moves. Because if your teams are sitting there with 4 wins or less, you're going to need to make some moves to get in there. Even though 4 wins is a winning record. And I'm talking about, you probably know by now, in most cases, if you've won or lost this week. But you need to start thinking about how you're going to get into these playoffs and how you're going to make those big moves. If you're 5 wins, 6 wins, 7 wins, it's very different. You can start to make those plans for the playoffs and start to think about making small tweaks and small adjustments. But even if you've got 1 win, 0 wins, you're probably not getting in. So you need to be thinking about 2 wins and upwards. How do we get in there? What are the things that we can do differently? And we need to really change our overall approach. And that's to start looking at matchups, to start looking at players, and to start thinking about how we can exploit certain situations. On the Patreon cast this week, I talked about looking at certain matchups. And in particular, I talked about a player that you can get off your rosters right now. And I hopefully told you all before, if you listen to the Patreon cast, you need to get Joe Mixon pretty much off your rosters. He's a player that right now I think is an expensive luxury, given how the Bengals are playing, given that Mixon yards after contact hasn't been great, given the fact that he's not finding the end zone anywhere near the regularity that we were seeing. I mean, they were absolutely gashing the Falcons yesterday, and yet Mixon did get some touchdowns yesterday, which was helpful, but the yardage, the production isn't there. The touchdowns kind of save him, which is good in the sense of a sell value now. But I think we're at this point where we need to sell on Joe Mixon, and his schedule coming up is pretty terrible. His schedule in the fantasy playoffs is even worse. I'm looking at Joe Mixon, and I've got loads of data and stats to tell you why. But the bottom line is this, that his efficiency metrics aren't there. Usage is nowhere near where it was in 2021. And his schedule's bad. All of this is pointing to an opportunity to sell high and get yourself an absolute haul back. And if you can get, for example, right now, if you could trade Joe Mixon for Kenneth Walker and a decent wide receiver, that's a really good trade. If you can find yourself getting some decent receivers that are going to give you the opportunity to improve two positions for one. So that's the kind of situation I'm looking at, taking a small hit, because I don't even think it's a hit if you get someone like Ken Walker, and trading, and getting a wide receiver in return. On paper in redraft, that looks fair, but actually you're stacking yourself an advantage, because I don't think Mixon's touchdown numbers are saving his fantasy points right now. That's not sustainable. It's not going to remain the same. So those are the types of situations now where we need to have a think and think, who are players who we can get off our rosters who are not going to deliver down the stretch. So I'm going to do some strength of schedule stuff as well. So there's lots of stuff going on. I would recommend at some point listening to the Waiver Wire podcast I just put out, or in particular, because I get more time on it. I was actually on the Fantasy Pros podcast today. I don't think it's out at this point, but I think it will be out if you're listening to this on podcast version. It will be out at some point. I go into some players that you can pick up now pretty cheap on the waiver wire that you can add in the majority of leagues that will make a difference, that are home run balls. So I'm looking at players like Khalil Herbert, Marquise Goodwin, although now that one probably doesn't look quite as good if DK's only going to be out for a few weeks. But I think for a short filler, that looks a decent pickup. Gus Edwards, Damian Williams. These are the sorts of players. I look at Kyron Williams is another player I'd take a punt on because he's cheap. And I think now, when you're thinking about your fantasy roster, what people are doing now, and I wrote about this in the book, is they're stashing players on their benches, and you can't do that now, especially if you're 3 wins and below, or even at 4 wins potentially. You need to look at your bench spot, and each person in your bench has to be someone that you feel can contribute. Either they're going to contribute now in the short term, or they're going to contribute in the next 1 to 3 weeks. No point thinking about the playoffs, because you've got to get there. And if you're stashing players for playoffs now, or if you're stashing handcuffs, if you've got Alexander Mattison on your roster right now, and you're 3 wins, 2 wins, 1 win, he needs to go. He's a dead weight. And I get that opportunity of, oh, well, if Dalvin Cook gets injured, because he gets injured a lot, then I've got Alexander Mattison. That's great. What if Dalvin Cook doesn't get injured until week 13? Or what if he doesn't get injured at all? That's a roster spot that is gone. It's gone from your roster. You need to have every single player. You almost need to treat it like a DFS proposal. You need to think week to week, and you need to think maybe 2 to 3 weeks tops ahead for bye week cover. You can't be sitting there with players who you feel are going to add value down the stretch. If you've got Deshaun Watson and you're 3 wins or below, he's got to go. If you don't have IR stashes and you're holding IR players, got to go. All those players that are just not going to contribute in the next 1 to 2 weeks, they got to go off your roster, whether you trade them, whether you hold them, like cut them, doesn't matter, but they got to go. And you've got to get guys like Khalil Herbert, like Gus Edwards, guys that if something happened tomorrow to a player on your roster, it's not just next man up, it's next guy who's almost as good as the guy you're about to lose. And that is really how you got to treat it. You should be at 3 wins or below now, be the most active person on your waiver wire and on your trade list. And if you're not, then you've only got yourself to blame at the end of the season. You'll sit there and you'll blame injuries, or you'll blame Tom Brady if you've got loads of Buccaneers. But actually, you got yourself, because you've got so much time now to change the landscape. You've still got half a season. You win the majority of the games now, from now to the end of the season, and you're on 3 wins. You'll still make the playoffs. That's how this works. And you can change it. There's so many players right now that are fantasy relevant, that are available on waiver wires or available for trades. You've just got to be bold and make the moves. Let's look at, for example, just over the last 2 weeks, players who are in PPR leaders at their position. I'm just pulling it up. But also at this point, if there's any questions while I'm talking, then just chime in and I will find them and I'll add them, because I think this is really important. This stuff that people don't talk about on podcasts. People tell you who to pick up, and people will say, "I'll pick this person because they are, they're free in your league or whatever." But actually, it's the strategy behind it. It's around your bench. Fantasy benches are there to be used, and you've got to be a little bit different. I was having a chat with someone in our Patreon group, and he was saying I should move Gus Edwards from my IR because it's in the spirit of the league. So, okay, if it's in the spirit of the league, that's one thing. But actually, if you've set your lineup and you've set your bench for that week and you're not going to put Gus Edwards in there, why would you activate him and drop someone? Why not just take advantage of the fact that you've been proactive and you've set your lineup and you've set your bench? And if you're not going to play Gus Edwards, leave him on your IR until you have to make a transaction. Then fix it. You're being rewarded for being proactive. I always like situations like that where if you're proactive and you set your lineup and you set your benches and then someone comes off IR on a Sunday, you know what? You've earned it. You've earned the right to have an extra couple of days to kick that decision around and decide who to lose. And that's more intelligence, because you might have had Breece Hall as your starting running back that week. Now he's injured and now he's done for the season. That's the player you're going to cut today for Gus Edwards to bring up. And it's an easy decision. And that's not a nice way to think about it, but that is how you play. And that's the advantage you gain by being constantly active in your league, setting your lineups in advance, setting your bench in advance. Because now, if you have Breece Hall in your league, you cut him, you haven't actually lost a roster spot. Or you can switch him or do it. Well, you can't, because Breece Hall isn't officially IR'd yet, but you're not going to keep him in a redraft league. So that's one thing there. While I was putting up, I was just looking at leaders over the last couple of weeks. So we're looking at, say, week 5 to week 7. In PPR, so we look at running backs, right? So Austin Eckler 1, Josh Jacobs at 2, Leonard Fournette, and everyone's sitting there thinking, "Oh, the Bucs offense is bad." Leonard Fournette is the running back 3 over the last 3 weeks in PPR. So again, he's a player that right now people are down on because people are perceptionally down on the Bucs offense. He's a piece you might get for Joe Mixon and a wide receiver. That looks doable. So have a think of that. Ken Walker's 4. That's why I mentioned him. Breece Hall, unfortunately, is 5. Benjamin is 10. Raheem Mostert, he's a player that's still knocking around quite a few waiver wires. He's RB14 now. And then you've got just these part-time contributors. Deion Jackson is RB17 over the last 3 weeks. And that's what having a part-time contributor can happen. That's why you've got to be active on your waiver wire as much as possible. These guys like Tyler Algier, they're roster clogs. Everyone's saying, "Well, go and get Tyler Algier because he's getting volume." Yeah, that's all good and dandy, but Tyler Algier in PPR is the running back 34 over the last 3 weeks. He's getting volume, but he didn't do much with it. Like, that's why shoot for the moon. Go for Damian Williams. If we look at wide receivers, again, we're thinking about streaming combinations. So we're looking at some of the players that have come up here, and these are players that were widely available. Paris Campbell is still widely available, although we've just talked about that one maybe not being the best bet. But we're looking at, Chase Claypool, widely available. He's wide receiver 18 over the last 3 weeks. We're looking at George Pickens was widely available. Alec Pierce was widely available. Devonta Smith is a player. Bye week, he's still wide receiver 26 over the last 3 weeks, and that includes his bye this week. There's lots of examples here. Donovan Peoples-Jones is a great player to talk about. So Donovan Peoples-Jones right now is available in a lot of leagues. He's wide receiver 33 over the last 3 weeks. His schedule coming up is amazing because he's got the Ravens. He's just had the Ravens, sorry. He has got the Bengals, which will be a matchup where he'll get a lot of volume. Then he's got his bye. Then he's got the Dolphins, where he'll get a lot of action. And then the Bills. So he's got a really good set of matchups coming up. And that's someone that, for me, Donovan Peoples-Jones, over the next 3 weeks, is going to be a lot more useful on your bench than someone like Alexander Mattison. And in fact, if you want to lose him after the Miami game, that's fine. You can make that case for it. Yeah, MVS is someone that's available on quite a lot of waiver wires. He is the wide receiver 36. Again, these sorts of players, they can just offer you short-term relief and get you short-term points. If you add those up in sections, 2-3 week windows, and then add them up and add them up and add them up and add them up, they're going to end up being a wide receiver, anywhere from wide receiver 10 to wide receiver 30. And that's going to help you. And that's so much better than having a running back handcuff on your roster or someone who's just going to tick along that you're never going to play. And be ruthless with your roster. Look at it and go, who is on my roster right now? Am I ever going to play them unless the world caves in? No, well then I'm going to get rid of them and get some fresh blood in. And I think that's really, really, really important. So here's some tips thinking about how to get ahead, and then we'll go through some players. Some tips I'd give you right now to make the playoffs. Look at if you're in a fab league, look at all the fab that all your players have, write it all down, and look at where you stack up versus everybody else. If you've got more fab than most, be aggressive on the waiver wire. Keep picking up players as much as possible, and make sure your opponents don't get them. If there's opportunities to get players, just keep rotating your roster, keep rotating those benches as much as possible. If you're 5-2, 6-1, 7-0, then you can be more looking ahead at matchups, so maybe not looking at the immediate future unless needed, and look towards the end of the season, the playoffs, and think about players, DSTs, etc. that might be good plays for them when the time and appropriate time comes for that. But you can start sort of almost buy hopping. So you look at this week's buy, you'll have players like MVS drop to the waiver wire. You have players like Pacheco, probably won't be picked up. He's available in 70% of the leagues. It looks like they're trying to drive him to a starting role. Just stash him for a week. If you've got 5 wins, 6 wins, 7 wins, you don't need Pacheco this week. You can stash him and then see what happens next week. And if it doesn't work for a couple of weeks, that's fine. You can stash. You can just cut him. But he's going to be cheaper this week because he doesn't add anything to a roster this week because they're on bye. So if you're 5, 6, 7 wins, you can make those kind of moves. Look at the players on waiver wire that are on bye this week. There's a lot of Chargers on bye. People like Josh Palmer, for example, who's got a concussion. He's not. I mean, they're on a bye anyway, so he wasn't going to play. Hasn't played this week. No one's going to be in an instant rush to go and pick him up. He's someone that you should be picking up if you're a 5, 6, 7 win team. Stash him. He's going to be fantasy relevant down the stretch, especially with Mike Williams out. Mike Williams is going to miss time. So Josh Palmer becomes all of a sudden a top 30 play potentially, certainly flex relevant. So those are the types of plays that you need to think about and make moves on. If I said you're 4 wins, 3 wins, 2 wins, 1 win, 0 wins, you need to be really aggressive. So actually those plays don't work because you need to have players who are going to be active every single week on your waiver wire. So you need the Khalil Herberts, you need the players who are going to make an instant impact now. When you're thinking about trading, look at how you match up with everybody else. So if, for example, you're really strong at wide receiver and you're really weak at running back, and someone is really weak at running back, and someone's really strong at running back and really weak at wide receiver, that's a good trade partner. You look at how you can make each team better. And people try to win the trade far too often. Actually, what you should be doing is you should be trying to find those partners and thinking, okay, how do I trade with them? And find a way to work out a deal together and chat about it. Okay, look, you need a running back. I've got Ken Walker going spare. Not that you're probably trading right now. Or Joe Mixon. I'm willing to take Michael Carter and Tyler Lockett, or Michael Carter and a Drake London who's got a great set of matchups coming up. You've got quite several options and where you can try and improve your team, or someone like Chris Godwin, because the Bucks offense is in free fall. But think about what you need and what you want, and try and find those sorts of partners, and you can get a deal like that. And obviously, you'll need to add like another wide receiver or something, but you can just make it sort of enough to make it fair. But they're good grounds to start trade negotiations on. And if they're desperate for a player at position, you're offering someone like Joe Mixon. That's a really good place to be. Like, you can start to get quite aggressive, especially if it looks like they're getting the best player in the deal. That's really important. Let's look at some situations right now. So we sit there and think about some matchups, etc., that we can consider. Looking at strength of schedule. So I'm looking at wide receivers. I'm looking exclusively just at the next few games. So I'm looking at I've got a 4-week window here. So someone like Drake London for me has an amazing schedule, because he's got the Panthers, the Chargers, and their DB situation is just absolutely knackered anyway. The Panthers again, and then the Bears, and that's a massive 4-game stretch there. No bye. Drake London looks like someone that you could, if you can acquire him right now on the back of a couple of down weeks, that could be a really good opportunity to take advantage. Darnell Mooney's floating around, and I know that Bears offense is really bad, but they've got some matchups here. Okay, the Cowboys isn't overly that attractive, but they've got the Dolphins, the Lions, and the Falcons in their 3 after that, in weeks 9, 10, 11. So someone like Darnell Mooney might be worth just having an explore and picking up, and just seeing if that offense can finally start to click and do something. We're looking at Michael Gallup, again, someone who didn't have a really good game, and I know they've got a buy-in here, but he's got the Bears and the Packers, which is a bit of a difficult game, but then the Vikings. Michael Gallup, or even Noah Brown. I think Noah Brown's day is kind of over, but I think Gallup is someone that will be worked into this offense more. I've talked about Donovan's Peoples-Jones. He's got the Bengals, the Dolphins, and the Bills. Like I said, decent lineup coming up here. Not that I'm chasing Green Bay wide receivers, but their matchups are pretty good coming up. Miami, but you don't really want anyone on there. But here's another one for you, Tyquan Thornton. He's got the Colts coming up. They seem to be in disarray. The Jets is a difficult game, but given how accurate Mac Jones is, that might be a decent game to go at. And they've got them twice. And that might be a negative game script game. So you might see more Tyquan Thornton. He's available in nearly 80% of leagues. He's someone that I'd be picking up to explore. The Giants have a really good schedule over the next few games. They've got the Seahawks, the Texans, and then they've got the Lions. And so you're looking there and you're thinking, I'll get Wan'Dale Robinson. Wan'Dale Robinson's available in over half of leagues. He's someone that's a must-add. Even Darius Slayton. Darius Slayton is one of those sort of boom or bust guys. But if you're in Last Chance Saloon with 2 wins, I put Darius Slayton in a couple of lineups. He's going to return me at least a victory in one of them, because he is that deep ball threat. He is, he is someone that is an outlet there, and he does get in the end zone every now and again. So he's someone that you can shoot for the moon on. There's definitely a few. If you can see someone like Russell Gage, over the next few weeks, they've got the Ravens on Thursday Night Football, they've got the Rams, and they've got the Seahawks. If his hamstring's not too bad, Russell Gage is someone that you can potentially buy low on, or is going to be out there in leagues because he's not been producing too much. These are the sorts of situations that you can try and buy on. Even the Seahawks, they've got the Giants next, and then they've got the Cardinals. The Cardinals are great to pass on. So that's a really good situation for Marquise Goodwin over the next couple of weeks. These are wide receivers that aren't very popular. They are available, but you can potentially buy, get off the waiver wire for next to nothing. Or if you're really trying to get hold of, somebody in a trade, and you're thinking about, okay, so what teams here? If you could try and get someone like CeeDee Lamb, that's going to be quite difficult. That's someone who has a great set of matchups coming up, as I've talked about. I think Courtland Sutton might be one to go after. I do think Jerry Jeudy's going to get dealt. I think that's going to unlock KJ Hamler. So KJ Hamler's another one I'd be stashing on a waiver wire, hoping that one comes in. And I think if you can get him or Sutton, and that offense is bad, you could probably get Sutton for half of probably what he's worth, given how bad that offense is. but his schedule coming up over the next few weeks, where he's got Jacksonville, Tennessee, and then the Raiders. That's a good set of matchups to go after, and I think that's one I would potentially be looking to exploit. Potential waiver wire add someone like Craig Reynolds, although I'm slightly down on this offense unless Swift's back, but he should be back hopefully next week. Amon-Ra St. Brown's out, so Craig Reynolds and DJ Chark's on IR. You know, they've got a good set of matchups coming up the Lions, so maybe someone like Craig Reynolds off the waiver wire could be attractive to add as a 1 week, 2 week play. We talked about the Colts. I'm less in on them because of Sam Ehlinger, but you never know. That might be an interesting one. Someone like MVS, they've got a bye this week, but then they've got the Tennessee Titans. Those corners can get, begotten that. And I think MVS is a great play in week 9, for example. So that's one to potentially stash if you're winning. There's some really good examples of potential players that you can pick up. And Tyler Lockett might be really difficult to try and do now, but he might be one to go and grab over the next few weeks. Chris Olave has a decent schedule over the next few weeks. So Chris Olave has, for example, he has the Raiders and then the Ravens and the Steelers. So he's one that if you can try and prize him from somebody for a Joe Mixon-like trade, is someone that I'd like to go for as well. So there's a few names of players to be trying to acquire or think about playing over the next few weeks. If you look at the running back position, it's very different because there's not actually that many viable running backs. I wrote a piece on the website on Friday and talked about the decline at the position. And actually, the running back position is pretty terrible right now. If we're sitting there looking at the running back position, just on the season, there isn't really that many difference makers. So if you were drafting quite wide receiver, running back light, you've actually done really well because Austin Eckler's a first round player. Saquon Barkley's, Austin Eckler's the only real difference maker. He's about 35 points clear of Saquon Barkley, but everyone else is really not all that far apart. Josh Jacobs was someone who was drafted quite low. Breece Hall was someone that was drafted quite low. But if you look at Joe Mixon, who was a first round pick, he's only 9 points clear of Clyde Edwards-Helaire or Damian Pierce, Ramondre Stevenson, Miles Sanders. These players are all now in a pack. And if you're looking at, say, the running back 24 is Kareem Hunt to the running back 12, he's only 90, he's not even 20 points behind. So there's a whole cluster at the position. And really the only difference makers you've got right now are Eckler, Barkley, Chubb, Jacobs, and Christian McCaffrey just. And then after that, you've got maybe Fournette. Even Henry hasn't really turned on the afterburners. Henry's only got 6 points more than Mixon. So there isn't that much of an elite gap at the top end of the running back position. So you've got this, you've got a number of backs here that you could be picking up and, trading Joe Mixon for Miles Sanders and a couple of players is not a big gap. But like I said, if you can trade him to Kenneth Walker, given the fact that Kenneth Walker didn't even start the season as a starter, Joe Mixon is not even 30 points clear of him. And that gap is shrinking every single week. It's going to continue to shrink. So I think Kenneth Walker is a player who's going to catch up and potentially overtake Joe Mixon by the end of the season. Same for Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones is in a situation where, as much as he's dominating, he's not really getting clear of the pack of guys after him or just after him. So again, a player that maybe you can trade now, and his schedule coming up isn't amazing either. So if you look at Green Bay, they've got over the next few weeks, Buffalo, that's a tough game. Okay, you've got a great run matchup against the Lions, but then they've got the Cowboys and then they've got the Titans, who, as bad as they are defensively, are actually pretty good at stopping the run. They've only given up one touchdown this season, second fewest running back yards. So when you're looking at those matchups for Aaron Jones over the next few weeks, they don't look good. if you're sitting there with 2 or 3 wins and you've got Aaron Jones, you probably need to shop him because the next few weeks are not going to give you enough points to get it done. So if you can take a Kenneth Walker and a wide receiver, that's going to help you out in 2 positions instead of 1. And that's how you got to view your lineups right now. Forget the names. If you can find a Packers fan who's going to take Aaron Jones off you and overpay for him, definitely do it. But this is the sort of stuff that you need to be thinking about now because you're not going to get elite performance from your elite running backs because they're not putting them up unless they're Austin Eckler or you've got someone like Saquon who could break out. Just looking at some matchups over the next few weeks, I mean, they're just not particularly brilliant. We look at someone like the Atlanta backfield. It looks okay for someone like Damian Williams in the short term, but actually it's going to be for Cordell Patterson when he gets back. It's really going to take off. The team with the worst rushing aspects over the next couple of weeks is the Arizona Cardinals. And given the fact that their offense is so bad, I know that, Benjamin had a game on Thursday and fair play to him. But actually, he's got some tough games against the Vikings and Seattle. And then he gets it really tough against the Rams and the 49ers. This might be a really good time to sell James Conner before he's back and hope that someone takes him off your hands in desperation and you can get more than what he's worth because he's about to really fall off a cliff here. Deonta Foreman is a huge fixtures are going his way. He's got a really nice schedule over the next few weeks. Khalil Herbert's schedule, and I think he might not be the designated starter, but I think he really is going to take a step forward over the next few weeks. I'd love to try and get him on as many teams as I can right now. Nick Chubb's got a difficult schedule, but he's Nick Chubb. He probably overrises that. But someone like Kareem Hunt, sounds like they're shopping him before the deadline. So be interesting to see where Kareem Hunt ends up. But I don't think it's going to be as good a situation he's in right now. So I'd be trying to get him off my roster now in hopes that someone buys the dream. Let's look at some schedules here. Players that you could potentially sell. Jonathan Taylor's run schedule it's not bad, but then with Sam Ehlinger, maybe they go up a bit. There's a few different teams here that have got interesting situations. Josh Jacobs has proven he's kind of proof. Maybe Alvin Kamara is someone. Now, Alvin Kamara is an interesting one because he doesn't have a great set of fixtures coming up. He's got the Raiders, which is okay, and then the Ravens, which can be run at, but they're not a bad team and they get it all together, and then it goes from worse because they've got the Steelers and then the Rams. Alvin Kamara hasn't been particularly great this season. Alvin Kamara he's currently in PPR. Yeah, the RB22. Granted, he's played a game less, or 2 games less than some, but still, his average has been okay. But they haven't been great at running the football. What you've also got on top of him is a potential court case that could be settled. If they're not going to make the playoffs, they might take a settlement in his court case, and then he might get his fine. We kicked that problem, didn't think it was going to be a big issue in season. We said we'd evaluate it in October when that hearing comes in November. They could kick it to the end of the season, and then he eats his punishment next year. They might decide to try and settle this and let him eat, and then let the NFL punish him for 4 to 6 games, knowing they're not going to make the playoffs. That is in the realm of possibilities. Got to be a bit careful, especially if they've just settled the civil case. So there is more. It sounds like some wheels are turning now. I'm not a legal expert, but there's something to be concerned about there with Alvin Kamara. If you can shop him off your roster now, that might be a pretty smart move if you can get some good pieces in return. Najee Harris is another one, although I don't think you're going to get anywhere near the kind of value, but his schedule over the next few weeks is pretty tough as well. So there's a few players that you should be considering to either buy or sell. Fournette's schedule isn't great, but given that the whole offense is going through Fournette, I'd be trying to get him if I can get him in a few places because I do think that starts to improve and turn over and get better. Same with Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry, someone who I think you can, I wouldn't say buy low, but he's someone that I'd like to be trying to acquire as well in a few places. If I can do a deal for, say, like, I don't think you're going to get a Mixon for Henry, but if you can try and sell that deal, try and get it done. Some players to consider. Find my other tab here. So obviously there's been some big situations here with Christian McCaffrey getting traded. What did we expect? Well, I mean, he got a lot of work, but next week I'd expect him to get even more work. It looked like it was a bit of a timeshare, but seeing as he only got the playbook on Thursday, it's not a huge surprise that he sort of shared some time with Jeff Wilson and some situations where he didn't run any running backs at all. So I do think you're going to get Christian McCaffrey take over. I think that means Jeff Wilson, you can cut him completely from your leagues now. And then Elijah Mitchell comes back in a couple of weeks. So I think when you're looking at running backs in Carolina who replaced him, I definitely think Deonta Foreman's the one I want. He's getting all the 2-minute drill. He gets he's going to get more work as this goes along. He was definitely the more explosive back. Gus Edwards' usage was fine. People are going to say he didn't get enough of a snap share. First game back for 13 months. Like, he still played 40% of the snaps. I think that's about what I expected. Gets the goal line work, gets the early down work. He's going to get more and more work as he's coming back. So don't worry about the snap share usage on him. Travis Etienne's usage is going from strength to strength. I tell you what, he's a player I'd like to acquire in a few leagues. That might be really hard. We might have missed the buy low window on him by about a week. His snap share has been playing around about that 50% all season. It jumped up to 80% this week, and he's jumped into that tier above James Robinson now, and he's getting the majority of the work. So we're looking at Travis Etienne. He dominated all the plays. He was on for 53 of the 65-ish plays, 32 first downs, got almost all of those. I got half the goal line looks, almost all the 2-minute drill, all the third down work. This is the same trend that we saw with someone like Breece Hall, for example, as someone that was starting to really take over the position and then took it over. I think now James Robinson is now a sunk ship. If you have James Robinson, if you can try and flip him for something, get what you can. Because I think that he is, I wouldn't say completely done, because in a Doug Pederson office, he's going to get work, but it looks like Travis Etienne is going to get more and more work, and he's kind of taken over that backfield. Pacheco, I mentioned him. He's still not playing a lot of snaps. It's still hovering around about 25% or so, so that's something to think about. But I do think they're trying to work him into a bigger role. And Jerick McKinnon at the moment is getting work that's quite annoying. But I do think Pacheco's want to own and watch that usage start to go up. It's starting to get more and more, but it's, weirdly yesterday, Jerick McKinnon had the majority of the snaps, which I just don't quite get. So I think maybe it was before the bye. We'll see what happens. A few of these, obviously, I talked about Paris Campbell over the last 2 weeks, 20 targets, 17 passes, but Sam Ehlinger there, I can't expect that to happen going forward. So I am concerned about that situation, maybe change and pivot completely away from him. Wan'Dale Robinson, by the way, his usage just shot through the roof. He's just playing 70% of snaps now. And now Richie James is pretty much finished. And you're going to see a lot in the slot. The only thing I'd worry about with Wan'Dale Robinson is if the Giants want to push in and trade for a wide receiver. But Wan'Dale Robinson's usage is trending towards him being not just a starting wide receiver, but a top 36 PPR player for the rest of the season. I mentioned Terrence Marshall Jr. I said he's the guy that's going to take over from Robbie Anderson, and he definitely did. So, he played over 80% of the snaps. It was probably closer to 85% of the snaps he played. So Marshall is someone who is starting to get work. I mean, this offense is terrible, so I'm not saying he's something you should pick up, but maybe keep an eye on because it looks like he's going to get some work there. There's so many other players right now that you can consider. Let's talk about Gus Edwards. So Gus Edwards, for example, the reason I like Gus Edwards is, as mentioned, the 40% snap share and 40% of the down work, but his schedule is so good, as I mentioned. I just really think that he's going to get all those goal line carries and he's going to be highly productive. So that's why I quite like, if you can acquire Gus Edwards now, is a good time to do it. Same with Khalil Herbert. So let me tell you how good Khalil Herbert is right now. You're talking about a player who 3.1 yards after contact. Nobody in the NFL has more than him who's carried the ball 20 times or more this season. His yards before contact, by the way, is even better. It's 3.2. So that, 6.3 yards per carry he's averaging, but he's broken off 12 10-yard plus rushes, which only Barkley, Hall, Henry, Jones, and Sanders have more of. And he's one of only 6 running backs to have broken off multiple 40-yard plus runs. So Khalil Herbert's awesome. He's had one more carry than David Montgomery this season. He's got 156 more yards. So, we're looking, and Eberflus has said he's going to run the hot hand. I mentioned Damian Williams. I just think in terms of Tyler Algier, 1.5 yards after contact, rushing yards after contact. Damian Williams' career average is over 2.5, and over the last 5 years, he's been over that mark, except for last year when he was in Chicago. So that's why I think that situation is in play for someone like Damian Williams. Zay Jones, we're looking at Zay Jones and we're going, he's only Zay Jones, but he's 24th in targets this season. His usage is elite, and there's no one on that roster that's going to take any usage away from him. He is going to be a wide receiver 3 play for the rest of the season. So he's someone that you should definitely consider and be picking up as much as possible. Last thing I want to pick up is just a couple of areas where you can potentially make some gains. And one of the things I love to do, if I can find them, is start to look at teams that are putting up a lot of garbage time points. And I always find that's quite a good way to look at things, because if you can try and work out those sort of garbage time points and you can see a consistent trend on them, then actually what you can start to see is over time areas where you can exploit situations. So, for example, the reason I like that sort of fourth quarter passing, and I'm just going to pull it up now. It wasn't working on my laptop earlier, but the reason I like looking at fourth quarter points, and I've got a website that does this, especially passing points. So I'm just pulling it up now, is I like to start to understand where I can potentially get late game points, because I feel like at that point the game is on the line. You're more likely to get more efficiency. And it's something I've done for a few years and don't talk about it too often because it's quite hard to research. But if you can start to get a picture on fourth quarter passing plays and teams that are going to historically pass a lot more in the fourth quarter, you'll find a direct correlation between that and the number of points, especially when you look at the percentage of total plays. So, for example, Washington, by a long way, have the most amount of fourth quarter passing plays. They've run almost 100 this season. The reason this is important because that's when the game's on the line. So we're thinking of situations where we could potentially exploit sort of easy points. And called garbage time, but not all of these are potentially garbage time. And I'm going to share this image on Twitter. But in terms of, I'm just opening it up now. So we've got here Arizona are next. Again, wouldn't surprise you. So you're looking at a player like DeAndre Hopkins is going to benefit nicely. Zach Ertz as well. Indy, that's going to change. That situation is in flux. But the Jets, that's when they do get most of their passing volume is in the fourth quarter. So, looking at someone like Garrett Wilson, even Braxton Berrios. See, that's Braxton Berrios territory for me. He's someone that I'd keep an eye on in sort of play. The Chargers, so again, for someone like Keenan Allen, for Josh Palmer, their situations, you're going to see them come to party a lot more. Because if you think of the logic of this, these are teams that are constantly in battles in the fourth quarter. it's great to have great offenses, but if those great offenses are steamrolling teams, they're going to game manage. So they're going to sit there and manage the situation. Like, it will shock absolutely no one that the 6-0 Philadelphia Eagles have run the least pass plays in the fourth quarter. They don't need to. They've got double-digit leads in every single game. So they're just going to sit there and run the ball out, which means when you've got someone like A.J. Brown or Devonta Smith, you really only have them for 3 quarters. They've run 22 pass plays in 6 games in the fourth quarter because they've got the games in hand. Chicago, because they're just terrible. You got some really bad offenses on here. But again, Kansas City is another one. Kansas City is a great offense, not putting up many pass plays. They're averaging in 7 games, they're averaging less than 7 pass plays in a fourth quarter per game. It's not going to get you that volume. And you're thinking about game is 60 minutes. If teams aren't playing those 60 minutes because the games are in hand, we need to start thinking about the teams that are going to maximize that. So teams that are going to be in close games so far, and teams that run a lot of pass plays, so like Washington, like Arizona, where you can potentially get pieces of that offense, like New Orleans with Chris Olave, where games are live. Even the Buccaneers run the ball loads in the fourth quarter. Same go with Cincy, same go with Minnesota, LA, Miami, but it's hard to get pieces of that offense. But like the Jets, for example, I mean, the problem with the Jets is you don't get good for 3 quarters, but you get it good in the last one. But these are the sorts of things I like to look at to gain an edge. So I'll share the chart with anybody who wants it. I've got it here. And if you do want to see it, I'll share with you the volume of plays in the fourth quarter that are passing, because it's going to give you a good idea in terms of where you can potentially sneak an advantage. And that's where looking at matchups is really important. So looking at who's playing over the next few weeks and thinking about how you can analyze and get the best out of those trends. And again, if you want some strength of schedule data, I'm happy to provide it. Just ask me for it, and I'll get it across to you. Just send me a DM, and I'll try and service it as quickly as I can. That's the big strategy points. I kind of feel like I've had this opportunity to talk on my own, so I'm kind of gone off piste here. I don't have Dan to rein me in and talked about some potential waiver wire players who I did some research on earlier, some ways in which you can change your rosters. But I think just be bold. This is, I'm going to nick a golf phrase, Jack, so apologies. But this is like moving day. This is like Saturday for me in a major. This is the day where you can get yourself in a position to have a right to contend for the trophy, or this is the one when you fall away. And I think the next 2 weeks are really crucial. Week 8, week 9. Because I think once you get to those double-digit weeks, you kind of have a good idea of what your path is. I think this is where it's so crucial, is you've got 2 weeks. If you can get wins in week 8, week 9, you start to build that momentum. And if you are sitting there on 3 wins, you need both these wins, and you need them now. So you almost have to treat it like a DFS tournament. You have to take risks. You have to almost throw caution to the wind. Stop looking at the floor plays. Stop looking at playing players like Zay Jones unless you're absolutely desperate, and playing the players like Marquise Goodwin. Yes, it could fall well in your face, but if you don't do anything, you're going to lose anyway. So you need to make the bold moves. And I'm not saying go so bold that you start Sam Ellinger on Sunday, like absolutely not. But you do have to make some reasonable moves. What we're also seeing on fantasy teams is that having a fantasy elite quarterback is massive. It's going to be impossible to get Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen. Like, those guys are gone. But maybe you look at finding the next level. Someone like Tua, for example, maybe he's not saying next level. But if you're sitting here with Russell Wilson right now, you need to improve. You need to find a better quarterback solution. Maybe that's Kirk Cousins for you. Maybe you flip Russell Wilson for Kirk Cousins right now because it's going to give you a leg up. These are the sorts of things you need to be making moves on. Maybe you can find a way to get Jalen Hurts. I don't know. Get creative. Think of trades that you can make. But if you can upgrade the quarterback position, if you can get some streaming picks over the next 2 weeks, if we're looking at DST picks, I think Tennessee's a good pick this week for DST. I'd be stashing that one. I wouldn't just be settling. But then if I've got, say, the New England Patriots, I'm playing them every week because they're going to be a top 5 D for the rest of the season. They're a set and forget D for me. I think that's going to cover it for this week. I think I've got, I'm here to answer any questions. Join the Patreon. We do Patreon podcasts, do answer questions, do help as much as I can there in that situation. To make sure that your teams are all set, and we'll go through and I'll give suggestions and advice on who to pick up, who to drop, and try and help you co-pilot a team in your home league that matters as well. But ultimately, this is the week to make moves. I've put a lot out there for you. You might have to listen to this twice. If you listen to this in 1.5 speed or 2 speed, it might be a little bit difficult to get all the names I mentioned. So you probably need to go back and listen. But do fire off any questions, do ask for any stats or data, and I'm happy to provide those. But yeah, work your waiver wire this week, work your trades this week. This is a really big 2-week period now. Week 8, week 9. We know who the good offenses are, we know who the bad offenses now it's about exploiting matchups. Look at those matchups over the next 2 weeks. If they're playing the Lions, that's a pretty good matchup to target. Those are the situations you want to make the most out of. And if they're playing a really good D, then you need to fade them and make alternative measures. But be brave, pull out, look at players like Isaiah McKenzie as someone who could potentially bring you a little bit of extra magic. I talked about him on Sunday on my Sunday transactions thread on Twitter. I talk about players that you can just pick up for free before Sunday. Isaiah McKenzie would have been a really good one to stash for future weeks. Other news, as mentioned, I think Jerry Jeudy is going to get traded this week. So again, KJ Hamler's a good stash. I do expect that one to go through. Whether it goes through before Sunday or whether it's going to be at the trade deadline, I don't know. I'd expect maybe the Buccaneers are going to be in for a tight end. We still don't know what's going to happen with Cam Akers. Expect him to get dealt. Elijah Moore, that situation's in flux. Kareem Hunt, that situation is in flux. We've seen teams not be really good at trading before the trade deadline. I think this is going to be the year. It doesn't quite fully break out, but I think we're going to see some trades. So keep an eye on that over the coming days. Stay close to the beat writers and listen to where all the possible destinations are. But that's going to do it. So waiver wire pods dropped. Feel free to go back and watch and listen to that. Please do like and subscribe. Please do write reviews. If you do want to join the Patreon, you can join for like £1 a month and get access to the Patreon chat and Patreon podcasts. But if you join for a few quid more, you can get merch if you stay for 6 months and things like that. So, do stay chatting to us. Join the Patreon to get even more closer access to me. If you do get a chance, do watch the Waiver Wire podcast on Fantasy Pros. I talk about some of the things talked about in this podcast, but in a different sort of angle or more detail on players like Khalil Herbert. But just would appreciate any support and growing the game here and getting more analysts on shows like that. So showing them that there's a big market in the UK means they'll reach out to more UK analysts, which ultimately is the goal here. So do tune in and do that. And yeah, just thank you very much for listening, for subscribing, for the support. Big couple of weeks now. Make those moves, and I look forward to seeing how you get on. But until then, as always, don't forget, keep rushing.